Now for the lead story tonight. Fresh details about the coronavirus and why America needs to listen. We didn't know a lot about the virus in the beginning because China destroyed their lab samples and lied about it. We still can't get into that country and figure out how it all started. But we learned from Europe and then more once it hit here. The data's in, and it's better than we thought. But brain-dead politicians won't look at the new data. They ignore the facts to keep us locked down. They're either scared, dumb, or have a political agenda. So Dr. Scott Atlas is here tonight. He's the former chief of neuroradiology at Stanford University Medical Center, and he's a senior fellow at the Hoover Institution, and he's going to tell us the 5 key facts about corona that will lift this lockdown. All right, doctor, you have the first key fact. The overwhelming majority of people don't have any significant risk of dying from COVID-19. Tell us more about that.
The lockdown is really against all evidence and, frankly, common sense. The first fact is the data shows that the fatality rate is far less, probably 1/10 or even lower than what was originally estimated. And that data comes from all over the world and all over the United States. And in fact, there's something even more striking about it. The fatality rate is very, very low, extremely low if you're under 60. And that is new data, really, that has just come in from all over Europe on good studies. In fact, the reality is, and you get shamed for saying it, for people under 60, the fatality rate is less than or equal to the common flu. The second fact, really, is that we know who to protect. And this is really critical, because this is a serious illness, and it's very dangerous for certain people, older people, particularly those with chronic diseases, like specifically diabetes, kidney failure, heart failure, and other immunocompromised people. That fact, by the way, is not new knowledge. That's something that every medical student in the country would have known from day one, because that's the same group that gets a really bad illness from other viral respiratory infections. But be that as it may, we see that our politicians have not put in place the obvious restrictions on who to protect. That is, people in nursing homes who by definition have underlying diseases and are old. And we're seeing in some states more than half, sometimes up to 80% of deaths in nursing homes. This is really a really inexcusable lack of common sense in basic public policy. Okay, the third fact...
Yeah, and that was a total catastrophe in New York and New Jersey and Pennsylvania. It just hasn't really been covered. So the third thing is, you talk about immunity. Tell us about population immunity.
Sure. Well, I mean, by isolating every single person and avoiding all human contact, you have literally prevented the best mechanism to establish population immunity. Because when we get infected with a virus like this, we generate antibodies, and those antibodies are protective. And what happens is when low-risk groups, which 99% of people, by the way, have no significant problem when infected, 99%, including 50% where no symptoms whatsoever. When you get immunity and low-risk groups infect each other, there's a blockage of sort of the pathways to the vulnerable. This is called herd immunity. And we have already proven that that's been interfered with by testing people to see how many people have antibodies. It's very low, even though the disease is highly contagious. And if you don't believe in herd immunity, by the way, then you would never believe in any vaccine, because vaccinations are given with that specific reason, to establish antibodies in people and establish population immunity.
That's right. And then you also mentioned in fact 4 that a lot of people are dying because they're not going to the hospital to get the medical care they need for things other than COVID-19. That's hugely underreported.
This is really critical. The policy itself is killing people. The policy of lockdown and total isolation has impaired and stopped most medical care. 150,000 new cases of cancer every month in the U.S. occur, and we're not making those diagnoses. 2/3 of people who have a cancer screening test aren't getting it. Half of people on chemotherapy aren't going in. Acute heart attacks and strokes are not calling for emergency help, and they are dying. And the worst of all ironies is that 2/3 of immunizations in California, this is the data, 2/3 of childhood immunizations are being skipped. We are creating a massive catastrophe in healthcare and killing people by this very policy.
I mean, it's just unbelievable how the politicians don't look at the new data and then make different decisions. I understand the initial social mitigation, but after the data comes in, you got to move. Lastly, fact 5. I mean, we know who to protect. This should have been targeted towards the elderly, towards the sick, and then that should have been the policy. I'll give you the last word.
And that's exactly what to do now, is we strictly isolate and protect the people in the nursing homes with required testing. We do some prioritized testing that is necessary to make sure that hospitals don't continue infections. And we tell mildly ill people to isolate. And then we open schools, we open businesses and offices and restaurants with the necessary hygiene and sanitization standards and warnings in place. But society must function. The cure here is worse than the original disease at this point.